way that this campaign hasn't been described, and I've been thinking about a lot of this, is that this is the campaign of audacity. We have the audacity to believe that we are worthy. We have the audacity to believe that peace and diplomacy is better than war. We have the audacity to believe that everyone deserves a fair fighting chance in our country. We have the audacity. And for me, what Senator Sanders came and brought, there was already a political revolution. So Senator Sanders didn't come and introduce anything new. What Senator Sanders and the Bernie Sanders campaign was able to do is take the political revolution that was already swelling on the ground and gave us a platform to talk about our issues. People have been there are people who've been doing criminal justice reform, sisters and brothers, for decades, if not more than that. There have been people doing work around immigration reform, money out of politics, gun violence prevention, gun control. Like, the people been doing this work, right? So Senator Sanders didn't introduce this to us. He just said, this campaign is not about Bernie Sanders, this is about us. So I'm gonna give you a platform. I don't have any credentials to be, I personally feel humbled. I was telling folks that on the day of the debate, I was in the spin room on behalf of the campaign when another candidate brought all the top New York State brokers, top elected officials from the governor to members of Congress, and Senator Sanders gave the platform for the organizers in New York to come in there and talk directly to the media. So, what sustains me is that I'm not part of a political campaign, I'm part of a political revolution. I've always been part of one, and I'm gonna always be part of one till the last day that I'm on this earth. And I'm grateful to Senator Sanders for having the audacity to bring up the very issues that many of us have been working on for so many years. And what's going to keep me going is the people that are in this campaign. Bernie didn't make me white. Did he make you white? He didn't make me white. If you got into this campaign and you saw the number of young people, but also young people of color that are at the core of this campaign, you would understand that the future of our country is in the right hands. And I will say this, and I'm going to say this to the Democratic Party. I'm a Democrat, but I'm not a loyal Democrat. If I was the Democratic Party, if I was part of the establishment, I'd look at this campaign and say, where the heck did all these young people come from? These are the future of the party, and they don't know how to engage us. They're calling the future leadership of this nation, they're calling us uninformed, idealistic, they're calling us naive. We're in it for the, I don't know what, I'm not going to even repeat what that would, you already know where I'm going with this, but my point is this. The young people that are part of this campaign are fed up. We have no loyalty to the establishment that has done nothing for us and for our communities. And I want to tell Senator Sanders that we're going to the White House, but if something, I don't know what that is, like, we're going. I'm on my way there. But if something happens and we don't get to the White House, I'm committed that post-November, that I'm still part of this political revolution, and I ask you to be part of this political revolution.
That's right, that's right, that's right. Now, I just want to add, as an old school brother, that like Frank Sinatra, I'm young at heart. So some of us older folk are on fire too for Brother Bernie Sanders. Well, we appreciate the young folk. We appreciate some of us older folk. And it has much to do with his soul craft, that his soul has been shaped by a mother and a father and a brother and a wife and children and grandchildren to give him a certain character. Because we live in the most commodified culture in the history of the world, which means that everybody and everything is for sale. This brother is not for sale. He's not for sale. That's very important. That's crucial. That's a quality of character. That's courage. That's crucial. And that's not just a political judgment. It's a moral and spiritual judgment that has political consequences. And that's why when the younger generation looks and sees, because they have been bombarded by market culture more intensely than I have, and they're looking for something real. They're looking for something real. And they got it in this brother. They got it in the brother.
Absolutely.
This Friday night is the beginning of Passover. You know the story. So 400 years, people were enslaved. 400 years, they were hopeless. They felt like nobody was speaking for them. They were riled up inside, but nobody was speaking for them. And then, not to compare you to Moses, but somebody got angry enough to say it's time to go. It's time to believe that what has been impossible for so many generations, that nobody has ever known freedom, is actually possible. Trust me. Go through this water with me. Trust me. Come, and you will not believe what is on the other side. The Hebrew is Ozi v'zimratya v'yehili lishua. God, be my strength. Ozi v'zimratya v'yehili lishua. Ozi v'zimratya strength and strength, and may you be strengthened.
All right. You know, come on, give it up. Before Senator Sanders comes to give his closing remarks, I heard we come from a tradition that says, over my head I hear music in the air. And there must be a change somewhere. Senator Sanders, as we stand on the cusp of April 19th in New York City, what do you want to say to the people of the great empire state of New York?
Vote. Andrew, thank you so much. Great job tonight. What a panel. Is this a great panel or not? Time really flew, and I have been very moved by all of the panelists up here tonight. I think we heard a lot of profound thoughts, and I just want to conclude by picking up on points that all of the panelists made. I'm optimistic. I am optimistic because I have gone throughout this country, and I have seen the eyes of hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people and a lot of young people. And those eyes are telling me that those young people understand that they are the future of this country, and you know what? They are determined to help shape that future. So I believe and I agree with everything that the panelists said. This is not about me. This is about us. The truth is, from a very narrow perspective, if I were elected president tomorrow, I couldn't alone. Do you think I could take on Wall Street or corporate America or the corporate media? Can't be done. Nobody can do it. The only way it's done, and Linda, I think, made this point, and this is where we are optimistic. I'll give you just two examples. If we were here 5 years ago, no time at all, somebody jumps up and says, you know, we got to raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour. People would have looked at that person and said, $15 an hour? You're nuts. The minimum wage is $7.25. Are you crazy? You want to more than double the minimum wage? You're out of your mind. Maybe $8, maybe $9, who knows? $10, but 15. But what happened? What happened is people in the fast food industry, right? The fight for 15. And then you got Seattle and Los Angeles and San Francisco and Oregon and California and New York, $15 an hour. It happened because people had a vision and were prepared to fight. All right, another issue, if we were here 10 years ago, be honest, and somebody said, you know, I think gay marriage will be legal in 50 states in this country, nobody would have believed them. Too radical an idea. We know in this community the struggle and the hatred, right, over the fight for gay rights. Yes, we all know that. But today, you go to conservative parts of the state of Vermont, and I go to high schools. I used to, before I was running for president anyhow, I used to go to the conservative parts and I'd say to the kids, tell me, what do you think about gay marriage? This is the conservative part of the state. People say, kids say, gay marriage, what are you talking about? What's the issue? It's a non-issue today. That's what the revolution is about, where it becomes a non-issue. All right, but that happened because people fought. Do you think if we are successful and we pass a Medicare for all single payer program, 30 years from now, people will look back on this time and say, hey, Grandpa, don't tell me there was once a time when people didn't have health care. That's crazy. I don't believe it. You follow what I'm saying? All right? That's what we have got to. The idea that all people have health care, that's a radical idea. It's a conservative idea. The idea that we have a $15 minimum wage, the idea that we don't have the highest rate of childhood poverty of any major country on earth, these are not radical ideas. Now, the establishment wants you to think that they're radical. They think the status quo cannot be changed. But everything that you heard tonight from all of these wonderful people tells you that when we stand together, yeah, we can change the status quo and create a much, much better world. And hopefully on Tuesday here in New York State, we're going to start that process. Thank you all very much.
Come on, give it up one more time for Senator Sanders. All right, before we close out, just want to say God bless you. Y'all have a good evening, and thank you for coming out to the Faith and Justice Roundtable.
April 19th, make sure that you get to the polls and take everybody that you know, because New York State's going to take it home.
See you on Tuesday. Brooklyn in the house. Come on, I don't believe it. It's Brooklyn in the house. And it's Brooklyn feeling that's something that we call the barn. Let me hear you. Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. You can take your seats. Listen, we have a phenomenal and informal conversation planned for you, a Faith and Justice Roundtable, and we are so excited that you all have come out to have this really critical dialogue at a pivotal moment in the life of our country. in the life of this world we live in, because we know Senator Sanders is just fresh off a jet from the Vatican in many ways. So we're excited to have this dialogue. I'm Reverend Andrew Wilkes. I'm an ordained minister. I have the pleasure of serving at a wonderful church in New York City, and just so excited that we're here to have this dialogue. And without further ado, I'm going to invite the panelists with whom we're going to have a searching conversation. I ask that you pay your most acute attention to the issues that we're discussing, and then ultimately we're going to have a chance for all of you all to get engaged. That sound good? All right. So the first panelist I'm going to bring out is Linda Sarsour. Let me tell you who y'all talking with. Linda is the executive director of the Arab American Association. She has founded Empower Change, which is a critical online organizing agency, and she's just a stalwart advocate for change and a faith leader. Give it up for her. The next person I want to invite to come out is none other than America's greatest public intellectual. He's the author of books like Race Matters. He's the author of books like The Radical King, which compiles the works of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. I give to you my brother, your brother, Dr. Cornel West. Put your hands together. I want to make sure I'm equitable. Linda, I didn't give you an embrace. Got to have equity on a night like tonight. I also want to bring out, because it's important to have interfaith representation, and so we made sure that we have folks from the Christian tradition, from the Islamic tradition, from the Jewish tradition, and we also know that people, whether you're animated by a religious or a moral vocabulary, we all are committed to political revolution. Is that right? So I want to bring out now Rabbi Sora Luria. She is the founder and executive director of Immerse NYC. Put your hands together for Rabbi Luria. Oh, you can do better than that. Keep it going, keep it going. It is my distinct pleasure to introduce to you. He is a native son of this borough. From the great state of Vermont, the senior senator, put it up, for the next occupant of 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, Senator Bernie Sanders. Kick us off with some opening remarks.
This is a beautiful church. Whoa. And thank you all very much for coming out for an evening that I hope that you will enjoy. Is my wife here? Where's Jane? Is she here? Jane, stand up. We got some... Got my kids and my grandchildren, so we're all here. Let me thank Bruce Lutz and Michael Pugh for that incredibly beautiful music. And let me thank Minister Andrew Wilkes and Dr. Cornel West and Linda Sarsour and Rabbi Sora Luria for being here as well. You know, what the political revolution is about is breaking down barriers of all kind, including intellectual barriers. and that is trying to figure out how we do things outside of the status quo. And we're seeing this all over the country. I mean, it has been incredibly moving to me. We just came an hour ago from an art exhibition in the Bowery, where artists from all over the country have been doing incredible artwork in terms of what the political revolution is about. As you may know, we've received 7 million individual campaign contributions. Every day, today there was, where was it, in Washington Square Park? Spontaneously, we had how many people? Thousands of people coming out? I mean, every day, new things are happening where people are beginning to stand up and fight back and demand a government that represents all of us. Tonight, we're going to tackle, with your help, something a little bit different, something that we have not yet done in this campaign. And that is to kind of raise issues in the deepest sense. I mean, going beyond politics, going into a religious perspective, philosophical perspective. For example, I can tell you what you already know, that globally, and I just came back from the Vatican this afternoon, and I made this remark, globally now, the top 1% of the world's population owns as much wealth as the bottom 99% of the world's population. You have 80 people in this world who now own more wealth than the bottom 50% of the world's population, 3.5 billion people. 80 people, 3.5 billion, and many of those 3.5 billion are living on $1, $2, $3 a day, and their children are suffering and in some cases dying because they don't have a few dollars for medicine that would keep them alive. Now, nobody talks about that. Nobody talks about that. We have got to throw that issue on the table. Is this morally acceptable? I don't think so. I don't think so. I really don't. Give you another example again. And I want to put it, and I want your help in trying to address this issue, because nobody talks about it. Right now, in this country, 1 out of 5 people who goes into a doctor's office cannot afford to fill the prescription their doctors write. You got that? Because the price of medicine is so high. The 3 largest drug companies last year made $45 billion. What does it say from a moral, how do we approach this issue, which is beyond politics, to say companies are making unbelievable profits, and yet people in America are dying because they can't afford the medicine that the doctors are prescribing? Another issue, and again, I don't want to get off on this one in particular, but some of you know that just within the last week, Goldman Sachs reached a settlement with the United States government for $5 billion because they were selling worthless subprime mortgage packages, okay? Other banks reached even larger settlements. From a moral perspective, I don't want to talk about even the criminal justice aspect, go deeper than this. What does it say morally when the most powerful people in this country essentially acknowledge that they have been operating in a fraudulent, illegal manner? What does it say about our entire culture when the most powerful people essentially write a check for $5 billion and say, yes, we are responsible for the Great Recession, which impacted tens of millions of people? And what happens to them? Any of them have a criminal record? So I don't want to make even the political point, the moral point. Where are we as a society? When some kid gets picked up tonight for possession of marijuana, will have a criminal record for his whole life, and yet other people destroy the economy, nothing happens to them. And they are the most powerful people in our economy. What does it mean that you have a media out there that talks about everything in the world 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, except the most important issues facing working people? Not allowed to talk about these issues. What does that say? So the point is, what we need to do, and what I feel good about our campaign, is we're just busting through and forcing a discussion that the establishment would just as soon push underneath the rug. And I believe that in the bottom of my heart, once the word gets out, we have the vast majority of the American people on our side who agree with us. And we're going to push that discussion out. So that's why I'm here tonight, and we'll need your help. So in other words, I don't want to make this just political. I want you to go deeper into that, go into the guts of our society, and try to look at things from a moral perspective. So thank you all very much.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Thank you, Senator, for your very stern remarks about the importance of really taking a moral frame and using that to penetrate beneath the typical surface-level conversation that we often have in our political discourse. I want to give a question to our panelists. We'd love for you to touch on that very same issue. What, in your view, are the moral and spiritual ligaments of the political revolution? What's the moral revolution that helps us to get towards this political revolution that we're talking about? Linda, we're going to actually start with you, and then if you can just walk it down.
I was trying to respect my elders, though. All right. Assalamu alaikum, peace be upon you all. I'm very humbled and honored to be on the stage. Many of you know me. I'm born and raised in Brooklyn. I'm a community organizer. Brooklyn. And I'm part of social justice movements, and it's very simple for me. I'm a Muslim. That's what I'm supposed to do as a Muslim. My faith is not just a religion of peace and love and compassion, it's a religion of justice. And I'm part of this political revolution because there's a moral choice that you have to make in politics. Politics is not just politics, there's also supposed to be some morality to the politics. So in this race right now, there is only one moral choice as a person who is a believer. If you believe in a higher being, if your faith tells you to care about the most vulnerable, the most discounted, if your faith teaches you to stand with the poor, this is your political revolution. This is the only moral choice that you have in this race. I came to this campaign as a Brooklynite, as an American, as a New Yorker, but I came as a Muslim. And people also make this assumption that somehow as a Muslim I can't support Bernie because he's a Jew. But people don't understand the similarities and the very core tenets of Judaism and Christianity and Islam, three Abrahamic faiths, whose core is at making sure that those at the lowest of our society are our responsibility. In New York City, we walk over the homeless. We have people who can't afford to live in the city, people like me who can't afford to live in my own city that I was born and raised in. This is immoral, sisters and brothers. So I am in this campaign, not just because it's political or I want to be part of some radical revolution. There's nothing radical about Bernie Sanders. Nothing radical about him at all. So I'm asking all of you to take what Senator Sanders said and take it to a deep place, deep in the deepest of your heart. And ask yourself a question when you walk into those polls, when you're talking to your congregants, to your family members, to those around you, and when you're asking people or talking to people about what choice they're going to make at the polls, I want to ask you, from what place do you make those choices? And the way that I make my choices and the way and the work that I do is always from a place of morality, but also from a place where one day I will meet my Lord, and my Lord is going to ask me about the choices that I have made. And I want to be able to stand tall and proud and say, I always did the right thing to please my Lord and to help the most vulnerable of my society.
Wonderful. Doctor?
What a blessing to be on the stage with Sister Sarah, Sister Linda, Brother Bernie, and Brother Andrew, and be here with each and every one of you. Oh, this is special. This is special. Because we have already made history, and we are continuing to make history. This campaign is unprecedented in the history of the United States of America. Let us be clear about that. Let us be clear about that. Because our dear Brother Bernie, he's not a god or a deity. He is a human being who has chosen integrity, honesty, decency, courage, and vision, and to highlight my Christian tradition in the 25th chapter of Matthew that said, what you do to the least of these you do unto me. It's the orphan and the widow, the fatherless and the motherless. It's the working people, poor people. And as a revolutionary Christian, I know that it comes from my Jewish brothers and sisters connected to that Hebrew scripture that said, I have a covenant with you to spread hesed, loving kindness to the orphan and widow, the stranger, and to love thy neighbor as thyself. That's the 19th chapter of Leviticus, before a Palestinian Jew named Jesus said it. That's the connection of it. And then a rich Muslim, of course, I can't conceive of my life without Malcolm X. He's probably the greatest prophetic voice of the 20th century. Even as he grew and matured, his witness is inseparable from the rich prophetic legacy of our Islamic brothers and sisters. I was just with Bell Hooks last week. She's a Buddhist. Gandhi was a Hindu, wrestling with our precious Dalits, brothers and sisters, so-called untouchables. Why? Because of the same thing, getting at the deep moral and spiritual undergirdings of what this campaign is about. And what is that undergirding? It's fundamentally about recognizing that we live in a culture of idols connected to commodification. Money, money, money. And that results in what the great Abraham Joshua Heschel called indifference to evil is more evil than evil itself. Once that becomes a way of life and a mode of being in the world, so if you view life as a gold rush, you're going to end up worshiping a golden calf, and he who has the gold will end up dictating who rules, and the demos gets pushed out. You lose our democracy. We lose the respect and dignity of everyday people. To see Brother Bernie on the international stage speaking the same kind of language as Martin Luther King Jr. and Dorothy Day and Edward Said and A. Eugene Debs with that wonderful Brooklyn mediation and Vermont edition. That's why he's our brother. You know why? Because he's the real thing. He is
Indeed.
the real thing.
Indeed.
And you can't deal with the deeper issues if you're not the real thing. I come from a blues tradition, a jazz tradition. We know the difference between the real thing and the copies. We know the difference between the originals and the imitations. That's why I'm here, and I'm going to pass this to my dear sister Sarah with an H. Biblical Sarah is our dear sister.
Yeah, thank you, Doctor.
I'm so humbled and honored to be up here. Dr. West came to my college, I don't know how many years ago, 15 years ago, and radicalized me. Yes. So here I am, sitting next to you. It's quite an honor. I'm thinking about this week. In Jewish tradition, we read the portion of the Torah of our scriptures where we talk about the Mitzorah, the one who has a skin ailment, someone who has leprosy, someone who has been asked to leave the community because the community doesn't really know what to do with that person. And what happens in this parsha, in this story, is that the priest, one of the most important people in the community, goes out of the camp and examines the person who has leprosy and says, it's time for you to come back now. It's okay that you've been out of the camp for whatever reason, that you felt marginalized, that you feel less than, that you're worried that your community doesn't want to bring you back in and love you. I, the leader of the community, am here to tell you that you are healed and it's time to come home. And so when I think about what does Judaism teach, we know that we care for those who feel like they're not welcome in the camp. We care for those who feel for one reason or another they're not enough, they're less than, nobody wants to touch them, nobody wants to be near them. We know the leaders need to go out and get them and say, come, be with me. I will stand for you as a leader. I think we live in a hyper-connected, yet hyper-lonely time. And I work with a lot of people who share this with me, who say, I feel alone. Even when I'm with other people, I feel alone. And they want to build community, and they want to be part of something bigger than themselves, and they're not sure how to access that. And I think what you're doing, Senator Sanders, is showing them that there is more than just them. There is more than just their small community, that there are many, many people out there that feel alone, that feel marginalized, and that we want to bring them back into the tent, we want to bring them back into our camp, and show them that we care about them.
Absolutely, absolutely. Wonderful, wonderful. Incisive and insightful remarks from our panelists. So we dealt with a lot of what in various ways and forms, some of the kind of faith dimensions perhaps that undergird the political revolution. But also want to deal with the social justice dimension, right? This is our faith and social justice roundtable. So Senator Sanders, I want to direct this one to you, and then panelists, feel free to hop in. How do you define social justice? That word can often, it feels good, but sometimes it's used in a slippery way. You know, it's like sand. Sometimes you can't quite get it in your hands. So how do you define social justice? And then what are some of the most pressing barriers to accomplishing that ideal, as you understand it?
It's a tough question, actually. Without giving you the easy answer. I think where I come from is I don't have, nor do I think anybody up here, have magical solutions to the human crisis and personal happiness. I can't sit here and tell you that I have the answer as to how we're going to make everybody live happy and fulfilling lives. But this is what I learned as a kid a few miles away from here. This is probably the most important lesson that I ever learned in my life, and I learned it as a very little boy. We grew up in my dad, my mom, and my brother, Larry, grew up in a small 3.5-room apartment in Flatbush. And the major problem of our family was the constant tension that existed between my parents over money. Always over money. All right, my dad came to this country at the age of 17 from Poland, and for him, making the kind of low salary that he made was pretty good because he also lived through the Depression. So having a steady income was for him, pretty good. But my mother was born in this country, and her dreams were bigger. She wanted, outside of Brooklyn, I don't even know this term, we used, when I was growing up, the word private home. Does that mean anything to anybody? I got news for you, it doesn't exist anyplace else outside of Brooklyn. People own a home, a private home, as opposed to living in an apartment that we lived in, all right? And that was her dream. She died at the age of 46. She never achieved that dream. And what I learned at a very young age is to be listening, when you're a kid and you hear your parents yelling at each other, it's a very difficult and painful and confusing thing. Because you love your parents, and just to hear all the uncertainty in the house. We would go shopping. I'll never forget this. When I was a kid, leather jackets, I guess they always come back into vogue. That was the thing. And I said, Mom, I want a leather jacket. She took me, honest to God, to 15 different stores to see where she could get the best buy for that damn leather jacket. Which is why my wife will tell you I hate to go shopping. And this was just to save a few dollars. To save a few dollars. So to me, what I learned when you talk about social justice, I don't want to see lives destroyed. People suffer because they just don't have the kinds of money they need to live in dignity. Now, God knows you can have a lot of money, you could be an alcoholic, you could be a drug addict, you can get divorced 20 times. Money is not going to solve the problems. But what I did learn is that at least a certain level of economic security, right? If you know that if your kid gets sick, you can take that child to the doctor. Do you know what that means? What kind of load that is off of your shoulders? Do you know how many millions of people today are worried about how they're going to put food on the table for their children? How many elderly people are worried about whether they can buy medicine or not? So we can't bring human happiness to everybody. I don't know how to do that. But I do know that if everybody has health care as a right, if families know that your kid is going to be able to go to college regardless of the income of your family, if your kid has that ability, if we could deal with and destroy this institutional racism, which continues to cause so much pain and hardship in this country. So those are the things, not radical ideas. You know, I'm not going to solve all of the problems. But if kids have a decent school to go to, health care, education, you know, all of decent housing, we can just lower the stress level that so many of our people are living on. So to me, that's kind of a lot of what social justice is about.
I'm so excited. We have a spirited crowd in Brooklyn. Because we're in Brooklyn, and I want to give this to the panel, so I want to give a Brooklyn texture to the question. Is that all right, Brooklyn? There was a brother in Brooklyn, I'm going to edit it for a consecrated context, who said the rent is too expletive high. Y'all remember that, brother? So in the context of housing, where you have the central problem of not enough money to meet constantly escalating rents, not enough money to make your first down payment and to move into affordable home ownership, how do we move towards social justice when so many people don't have enough to afford a home or an apartment with which to build society or your family in the first place?
Affordable housing is probably, the affordability of New York City is probably the biggest issue that nobody wants to talk about. I mean, I was born and raised in Brooklyn, and I want to live in Brooklyn for the rest of my life, but based on where we're going, I don't know if we're going to be able to stay living here. I don't know if I can live here. It goes back to the core message of Senator Sanders' campaign. In New York City, our politicians are bought by commercial developers in the real estate industry, right? So they come into, let's be real. That's what it is, right? You gotta follow the money. And what happens is they come into our communities, right? They, not only are they pricing us out, but they're pricing out mom and pop businesses, including people like my father out in Crown Heights, right? And then they come in, they build these major hotels, they're coming industrializing our areas, and they're not giving us anything back. And the politicians are cool with that because there's money going into their pockets for re-election. And then the other problem is we need to define affordable, right? So they say, what are you talking about, Linda? We got affordable housing. Oh, a family of two that makes $90,000 is affordable housing? I said, what about those people that are making $20,000 and they have a family of 4 in New York City, right? What about families of 5 like mine that are making $60,000, $70,000 in a place like New York City and are barely making it from month to month? So New York City has a problem with affordability, and the people that are being priced out mostly are people of color in New York City. So when you listen to Senator Sanders' message, he talks about money out of politics. That's not disconnected from the issue of affordable housing, where real estate developers, the real estate industry is part of the money in politics that's going into the pockets of politicians and people running for office, and they're pricing us out of the community. So sometimes Senator Sanders is talking about income inequality and money out of politics, and maybe he ain't getting into the specifics, but at the end of the day, if you go deep in every issue that we're talking about, healthcare, affordable housing, criminal justice, the prison industrial complex, it's all about money, sisters and brothers. People are profiting off of our communities. So when we say money out of politics, that brings us all into the conversation. So don't say that Senator Sanders ain't talking to you because he ain't being specific about affordable housing or criminal justice reform. Take money out of politics, sisters and brothers. Don't allow the 1% to profit off of our communities, off of our bodies, off of black bodies, Latino bodies, immigration detention centers, people making money off of us. The message is the same. We can get into the details, into the nitty-gritty, but at the end of the day, sisters and brothers, affordability in New York City is taking money out of politics and not allowing the real estate industry to buy our politicians and then tell us affordability is $80,000 a year, which is mostly people in New York are not making that.
Yeah. I think we covered that issue as it needs to be covered. Let's switch gears to talking about the criminal justice system, because these issues are indeed connected. What are some of the direct impacts of the criminal justice system, specifically as it impacts people of color and minority communities and contexts? So I want us to kind of deal with what is the issue that we're addressing, and then how do we go about moving towards a solution? Maybe Senator Sanders, if you could start us off there, and then Dr. West, if you could hop in.
We owe a debt of gratitude to the Black Lives Matter movement. For substantially raising consciousness on this very important issue. So let's start it off. Fact. We have more people in jail than any other country on earth. Right. Think about it. China, 4 times our size, a communist or authoritarian country, doesn't tolerate dissent too well. We got more people in jail than China does. 2.2 million people, disproportionately African American, Latino, and Native American. All right, that's the problem. We are spending $80 billion a year to lock up fellow Americans at the federal, state, and local level. That's a lot of money. That is a lot of money. Okay, so that is, you have, and then to look at this problem, it's not just 2.2 million people in jail. What about the wife and the children back home? All right, so multiply that 2.2 by a whole lot of other people whose lives have been destroyed or significantly impacted. All right, that's the foundational issue. That's the reality. Second point that I often make, which the media does not talk about at all. Youth unemployment in this country is off the charts. It is a unbelievable crisis. I asked some economists to study this issue for me. I raise this issue every speech I give, all right? For kids who are whites, who graduated high school, didn't drop out. Dropouts, worse. Graduated high school between 17 and 20, real unemployment. That means they're unemployed or underemployed, 33%. Latino kids, 36%. African American kids, 51%. All right. I hope that people will speak to this. You are 18 years of age, you've graduated high school, you're African American, you're going out and you're looking for a job and you can't find a job for 3 months, for 6 months, for a year. Put yourself in that young man's or young woman's place. What happens to your self-esteem? What happens a year later when somebody says, well, what have you been doing since you've been graduating high school? You know, I've been looking for work. You haven't found any work yet? Where do you think you're going to turn your attention? You got no money. You want to get out of your home. What do kids want to do? They want to stand up on their own 2 feet, become adults, right? All right. and they're going nowhere in a hurry. So what I say all of the time is so obvious, and that is we have got to invest in those kids in jobs and education, not jails and incarceration. So criminal justice, for a start, means, and everybody should contribute to this discussion, how do we keep people from getting into the petty crime, the self-destructiveness, which may get them into jail? How do we keep them out of jail to begin with? And then number two, you got things like the so-called war on drugs, which has done enormous damage to millions of people. I did not know this before I ran for president. There are millions of people in the last 30 years who have police records because of possession of marijuana. Turns out, by the way, that the white community and the black community do marijuana at about equal levels. Turns out that blacks are 4 times more likely to be arrested than whites. All right? So this becomes a racial issue big time. All right? Now we can argue about the pluses and minuses of marijuana, but I believe we should take marijuana out of the Federal Controlled Substance Act. As Linda was talking about a moment ago, obviously it goes without saying, this is a no-brainer. Private corporations should not be making profits by imprisoning Americans or running detention centers or jails. We got to bring that. And we need radical changes in the culture of police departments. Now, I was a mayor for 8 years, so I'm not here to sit around and condemn all police officers. The vast majority of them are honest, hard-working, and they do a very difficult jobs. But we have seen too often police officers break the law with impunity. That's not acceptable. If a police officer breaks the law like any other citizen, that officer must be held accountable. And we're talking about changing a culture. It's going to happen. Our job is to make it happen sooner rather than later. What does that mean? It means that we have got to understand and train police officers so that lethal force is the last response, not the first response. I can give you many examples of people who I personally met with. I was at Leave in Albany just a week ago. Spoke to a mother whose son had emotional problems. He was paranoid, and the sister kept a very close eye on him because she knew that under certain conditions he would respond inappropriately. The young man went out on his own to go to the store in the evening. Police officers came up, they started questioning him, they got him terrified. He responded in a certain way, they ended up tasing him to death. Okay? In my state of Vermont, listen to this. A mother calls the police because her son is acting out. A mother calls the police because her son is acting out. Guess what? Son gets killed. Mother calls the police and her own son gets killed. All right? It is not easy being a cop, but officers must be trained to use other mechanisms to control circumstances other than lethal force. We need to demilitarize police departments so they do not look like invading armies. You know? What I have learned, and this is an area that I think many white people are just not familiar with. I've had, people live in white communities, their relationship is a problem. Every now and then, not often, you call up the police come do their thing. That is not the case in black communities. That is certainly not the case where kids are afraid of walking out on the street. And I want other people to go in this in greater length. But we have got to also make police departments, not that this will solve all of the problems, but have them reflect in their composition the diversity of the communities they serve. You gotta, not going to solve the problem, but if you have a black community and a lot of the police officers there are black, they'll have a better understanding of the community. Latino, the same, whatever it may be. So those are, just some of what I think we have got to do, and there's a lot more, and I want other people to deal with this issue. There was some of you may have seen or read about something that just came out of Chicago yesterday, I think, and will shock nobody. The mayor there, who is under a lot of pressure, put together some task force, and surprise of all surprises, the task force apparently came up with some honest analyses and said there's rampant racism within the Chicago Police Department. Is that the only police department in America where there's rampant racism? I doubt that very, very much. All right? So we got a lot of work to do. But the two issues, tackling institutional racism and criminal justice reform, and simultaneously making sure that our people have jobs and health care and educational opportunity, those seem to me the two approaches that we've got to go forward on. But why don't you, Cornell, why don't you pick it up?
Indeed. That's all right, yeah. No, I think Brother Bernie hit the nail on the head when he started with the value of our lives. Because the moral and spiritual basis has to do with the fact that each and every one of us, no matter what color, cultural, sexual orientation, civilization, or national identity, have a dignity and a sanctity. Now, for myself as a Christian, that's Imago Dei. For Pope Francis, Imago Dei. For my Jewish brothers and sisters, Imago Dei, made in the image and likeness of God. Now, what does that mean? That means the lens through which we look at or talk about justice. There's a lot of dialogue about justice. But I come from a people where people have been talking about justice all the time. I'm enslaved, Jim Crow, demeaned, devalued, lynched, and everything else. I say, I guess I have a different conception of justice than they do. The question is, what do you actually mean by it? What substance and content do? It's the lens through which you view that. See, Brother Bernie Sanders, when he talks about justice, he's looking at the world through the lens of those who have been treated unjustly, whose humanity has been overlooked or rendered invisible. This is very important. I think it's the best of humanity, best of America. It is the best of Jewish culture that looks at the world in its prophetic modes through the lens of an oppressed people and says what? That we must stay in contact with the humanity of others even as we must fight. Because see, you can't really use the language of justice unless you're willing to fight. You don't have a why. Because anytime you talk about justice from below, you're talking about coming together, organizing, mobilizing, keeping your moral and spiritual lens in place. But you have to be willing to pay a cost. You have to be willing to cut against the grain. That's why any talk about justice that's only justice soon degenerates into something less than justice. Justice is rescued only by something deeper than justice. And that's love. That's steadfast commitment to the least of these plight. So when our dear brother goes on television and says, for example, that a black life has exactly the same value as a white life, and I'm going to fight for it. Every politician talks that way. Look at their record. Look at what they've actually done. I don't want to hear what you're talking up here. What are you willing to pay for it? When this brother says, and Brother Bernie says, a precious Palestinian baby has the same value as a precious Jewish baby. Politicians will talk about it, but he says, no, I want to look at the world through the lens of that equal status. And what does that mean? That means everybody knows we're talking about the criminal justice system. All you got to do is, what would America look like if precious upper-class white brothers and sisters were going to jail at the same level of intensity as poor black and brown brothers and sisters? There'd have been prison reform long, long time ago. We know that. We know that. If there were massive unemployment among the well-to-do, no matter what color they are, we'd have different kind of Congress. And it's a class issue even within black and brown community. We have different black leadership if upper middle class children were going to jail at the same level as black poor children going to jail. That's the challenge.
Doctor,
that's the crucial challenge.
I want to get Rabbi Lurie in this conversation. You raised some critical points about the need to fight in order for justice to take place. Rabbi Lurie, I'm wondering, in your view, what does it look like to engage in that kind of fight and community organizing so that the power of faith in concert and collaboration with government and other entities can make justice more of a reality, so we can move from that talk to it being something that, you know, characterizes our everyday lives?
I think that when you talked about value, I want to go to that and talk about the spiritual aspects of that a little bit more. And just saying that when we live in a society where the market economy has gone crazy, we internalize it spiritually. And we believe that our value is based on certain external factors, like how much money we make, or how big our house is, or our private home, or what kind of car we drive, or who we associate with, whatever it is. And we don't recognize that you can't change in value over your life, because you are God's child from the moment you are born until the moment you die, and forever. And so, if we believe the market economy, we just want more, and we just want it now, and we don't want to think about the fact that we are God's children already, and we don't need any more. And that changes the way we think about our home, our family, our community. What if what we brought and who we are is enough? Then what does that mean for how we act in our day-to-day lives, and how we act with other people, and how we interact with other people? What if I'm enough and you're enough and we don't need more? What if that influences how we interact with each other, and how we interact with our community, and how we stand up for each other in our society?
Hop in here, please.
So today we've been talking about morality and the moral choice, right? So we have candidates who made a moral choice, or made a choice and it wasn't a moral one, to take money from the prison industry, right? So they gave it back according to the sources, right? But what kind of judgment did you have? What place were you coming from when you chose to take money from an industry that imprisoning black and brown people at disproportionate rates? So I'm sorry, that's a thing that I ask myself, and I think the fact that that question wasn't asked is very troubling to me. Senator Sanders, you said how much? 80 billion is how much we spend? So $80 billion we spend to incarcerate people, right? And then other candidates are telling us, how are you going to do universal health care? Who's going to pay for it? Who's going to pay for public college education? Instead of saying, hey, we paid $80 billion to incarcerate people, we could take some of that money and put it into education and health care. So, I also want to say, for those of us in this room who believe in God, I never saw God. I never saw him, but I believe in him, right? So in this campaign, don't tell me about being pragmatic, about what is possible, what I see now. I want to believe. I got faith. I believe in the power of the people. So that message ain't for people of faith. Because we believe in spirit. We believe in something around us that is higher than us, that allows us to go to a higher moral ground. So this is what this campaign is about, sisters. Don't let people tell you what the future will bring. They said $15 minimum wage in New York City was impossible. That's what they said. There's only one candidate in this race that said $15 minimum wage, federal minimum wage. But guess what happened in New York? We did it. It's possible. Everything is possible, sisters and brothers. So when you are thinking about, not just in this campaign, but in life in general, if you believe in something, you believe deep. Right? You believe. This campaign is about a future we believe in, not a future that I think I'm gonna get, or up to what I'm worth, or what people think that I'm worth, right?
That's right.
We're not asking for anything, sisters and brothers, that we don't already deserve. Healthcare, education, opportunity, jobs.
Yeah.
Like there's nothing lavish about the platform, sisters and brothers. So I want you to reframe this campaign from some idealistic, right? Because when people tell you idealistic, guess what they're telling you? Because you ain't worth it. That's why you're idealistic, right? You ain't worthy of those things, right? So I want you to leave here understanding that in this campaign, you are worthy.
Or we put it this way.
Go ahead.
Put it this way. Think about this.
Let me jump in here. We are getting...
Come through, Senator Sanders. Come through, Senator Sanders.
Brothers and sisters, we are beginning to get pretty deep here. This is good stuff. This is very good stuff. And what the three panelists said is very insightful. All right, let's talk about radical. I agree with Linda. My platform is not radical. You know what's radical? Radical is that over the last 30 years, not a particularly long time, trillions of dollars have gone from your pockets into the pockets of the 1/10 of 1%. That's a pretty radical idea. Radical is that based on a series of lies, we invaded a country, we lost thousands of brave men and women here, and hundreds of thousands of people in Iraq died. That's radical. Radical is that I live 50 miles away from the Canadian border in Burlington, Vermont. For 30 years, all their people have had health care as a right, not a big deal. Go to the UK, France, Germany, Italy, go all over the major countries of the world. Everybody has health care. You want to hear radical? You're living in the only major country that doesn't guarantee health care. Go on, people, that's radical. You want to hear really, really, really radical? The top 1/10 of 1% owns as much wealth as the bottom 90%. How's that? That is pretty damn radical. So everything Linda's saying, what are we saying? The kids have a right to get a decent education? That's radical? That we join the rest of the industrialized world and guarantee health care to all people? That the United States ceases to be the only, not only major country, one of the very few countries in the world that doesn't guarantee paid family and medical leave. Is that a radical idea? You got poor countries all over the world that are already doing that. You want to hear another radical idea? The scientists tell us that if we do not act boldly, the planet that we're going to be leaving to our children and our grandchildren will not be a healthy and habitable planet. That's pretty radical, that you got a fossil fuel industry spending millions of dollars trying to deny the reality of climate change. Man, that is really radical. So I think Linda's point, and if people question the agenda that we are bringing forth as radical compared to what? That stuff is radical. Ours is based on common decency. All right? So that is what is dangerous about this campaign, exactly what the three of these guys have been talking about. We get the word out, we're not radical. We are the views of the vast majority of the American people. What is radical is the greed of the top 1/10 of 1%. What's radical is the fraud of Wall Street. What's radical is a pharmaceutical industry that could care less about people who need but can't afford their product. That's radical. So we have got to change that discussion, and we're doing that. And that is the political revolution.
Wonderful, wonderful. Senator Sanders, thank you for hopping in, and I'm going to pivot a bit.
Yeah, because I wanted to tell my brother Bernie what truly is radical about him, his campaign, and our movement as a whole. Because radical means getting at the root of things. Right. It's getting beneath all the superficiality, beneath the mendacity and the lies, and being able to cast a spotlight on what has been hidden and concealed owing to power at the top. So when we talk, for example, about Sister Hillary and $133,000 that she received from the private prison lobbyists. Now, she gave it back. That's wonderful, but no. We cannot have politicians who proceed on the notion of the 11th Commandment, thou shalt not get caught. She got caught. She got caught. What is radical about Brother Bernie Sanders is a radical courage and a radical compassion and a radical vision. When you are living in a society of such indifference and callousness toward poor and working people, when you take a stand with courage and ask others to work with you and he's head of a jazz orchestra, not a military band. So he's not standing out there all by himself as some isolated entity saying, follow me, I'm the Pied Piper. He's like Duke Ellington. He says, join the band so our voices come together. We part of a movement. I'm only as strong as you are strong because we are radical in our courage, our compassion, and our vision. And do we think big? Yes, we think big because the suffering is big. The social misery is big. Our workers catching hell is big. That's why we think big.
Dr. West, I thank you for riffing on what it means to be big. If we're going to talk about jazz and your Thelonious Monk, thank you for letting me hop in a Coltrane-like capacity to pivot to you, Senator Sanders. I want to, I know we're all feeling the burn in a bold, boisterous way, but I want to talk about some fire that you have on another important issue, Senator Sanders. I'm wondering if you can explain why you think repealing the PLCAA will go a long way towards ending gun manufacturing in America when, in fact, the automotive and the tobacco industries have been able to survive without immunity and civil lawsuits and so forth.
Let me touch for a moment on an issue which is clearly a tragedy. We're losing about 30,000 people a year. A lot of that is suicide to guns. It goes without saying that we're going to have to take very bold action. So some history. Back in 1988, before some of you were born, I ran for the United States Congress. We have one seat in Vermont. There were three people. I ran as an independent, against a Republican and a Democrat. I ended up coming in second place, 3 points behind. And probably the reason I lost, can't be sure, but probably is that I was opposed by all the gun people because I believed way back then that we should ban assault weapons in America. It never seemed to me to be sensible. I come from a state where a lot of people hunt, but they don't use AK-47s to hunt with. They use rifles. And it never seemed to me to be sensible to be selling or distributing these types of guns. And I lost that election, and I voted to ban assault weapons since, and I'll vote for it tomorrow. These weapons should not be sold and distributed in the United States of America. All right. And that's the way I believe you ban assault weapons, and I think we have a growing consensus to do that. I think also in this country, let's be honest, and understand that this country is very much divided on gun issues. New York City has its views, Oklahoma has a very different set of views, and even Texas has a somewhat different point of view. Question that we have, rather than arguing year after year after year, what do we do about it? Now we can continue to argue or we come up with some consensus. And here's the consensus that I think works. Number one, most gun owners, most members of the NRA believe that we should not be selling weapons to people who should not have them, people who are criminals, people who have mental disturbances and should not own a gun. What does that mean? How do you deal with that? You expand and improve the instant background check. You want to buy a gun, we're going to find out you've beaten up your wife, you're not going to get a gun. You committed a crime, you're not going to get a gun. All right? You are, just come out of a psychiatric institution. We had a tragedy in my own state of Vermont. A woman I knew, beautiful woman, ended up in a psychiatric institution, came out, bought a gun, killed herself. And this happens, we got to deal with that issue. We have right now what we call the gun show loophole. You know what that is? What that means is you can evade the instant background show by buying a gun at a gun show through an unlicensed guy who's selling you the guns. You can get a gun that way. That's crazy. We've got to end that loophole. We have a straw man situation. You can legally walk into a gun store and buy a weapon, and then you sell it to somebody you know is a criminal. That should be a federal crime. It's not a federal crime right now. Now my concern, so these are the things that I believe there is a broad consensus around in America. I saw, maybe some of you remember, 6 months ago or so, there was a mass killing in Oregon. And President Obama got on the air, and I know the president, known him for many years. He's not the most outwardly emotional person in the world. He controls his emotions. But he was very upset, and you could see it. And what he said in essence is, look, no one has a magical solution as to how we solve these mass killings. No one can honestly promise you that some lunatic will not do some horrible thing tomorrow. No one can guarantee that. But we do have a moral responsibility to do everything that we can to stop these terrible killings. And that's what we've got to do. And I think, honestly, coming from a state that has virtually no gun control at all, I think I can put together that consensus made of those issues.
Just want to make sure I'm following. Now, speaking of consensus, you're, I believe, our co-sponsor of a bill to address this?
Well, I'm co-sponsor of a lot of these bills. In other words, I voted for them. But I think in its entirety, I think if we move in that direction, you're not going to solve every gun problem. You will go a long way. We're not going to get everything that we want, but I think that those issues will bring the vast majority of the American people together, and that's what I pledge to you to do if elected president.
So, just one more question, and then we're going to have to wrap it up. You talked a lot about, when you were in the Vatican, about climate change. And you oftentimes speak about climate change as one of the greatest planetary crises we face. I wonder if you can talk a little bit about the work that most needs to be done and connecting that to the work that we most need to do in terms of green jobs.
Excellent. I'll throw in a third point. Point that Linda made a few moments ago, that almost everything comes back to money and politics. All right? Question. And don't give the first thought that comes to your mind, because it may not be the right one here. Why is it that there's not one Republican candidate running for president, starting way back, I think there were 15, 18 of them, who said, look, the evidence is overwhelming, climate change is real, we got to do something about it. How come 0 out of 18 don't agree with the overwhelming majority of scientists? It's not because the Republicans are dummies and they can't read. They can read and they know the truth. It gets directly back to money in politics, because the day that that Republican candidate stands up and says climate change is real, we got to do something about it, the money from ExxonMobil and the Koch brothers stop flowing into his campaign. Now here is, to me, and I sit on the Environmental Committee of the Senate, let me tell you the bad news. This is very scary stuff. All right, we got to be clear. The scientists are now telling us that they probably underestimated the speed in which you're going to see cataclysmic problems. Okay? What we're looking at, and you're seeing it right now, in California and in agriculture, the crisis over water. You're going to see more drought. You're going to see more flood. You're going to see more extreme weather disturbances. We are destroying the oceans. The oceans. How does the planet survive if we destroy the oceans? You will see, according to the CIA and common sense, more international conflict. If people don't have water, if people don't have land to grow their crops, they're going to be migrating to another area and having conflict. You're seeing rising sea levels. Hey, New York City, wake up. Miami, Florida, wake up, because parts of your cities are going to be underwater. All right? Now, that's the very bad news. Here is the very good news. We have the technology right now in order to go a long way to combating climate change. And what it means is massive efforts toward energy efficiency. I've been in homes in Vermont. We brought a lot of money into Vermont. Weather gets cold there. We have cut people's fuel bills in half, cut their carbon emissions in half by weatherizing their homes. Do you know how many jobs we can create all over America doing that? All right. Rebuilding. I have been driving around New York City the last week or two, and driving is probably not the right word. We have been crawling through the traffic. Unbelievable, all right? We need in New York to put money into mass transit, into strong buses. All over the country. It was once a time when the United States had the best rail system in the world. That is no longer the case. We can move people. We can move cargo. Building a rail system. You know how many jobs you're going to create doing that? We should have cars that get 70, 80, 90 miles an hour, a gallon. We can move to the electrification of our vehicles and not cars that cost you $100,000 a piece. All right, we can do these things. We can move towards solar. Price of solar panels has plummeted. Problem is people can't afford the $15,000, $20,000 they need to put solar on the rooftops. We can lend the people the money, they repay it as their Right now, in states like Texas and in Iowa, significant part of their electricity is being done through wind. Geothermal has real potential. We're sitting on, we know how to do this stuff. We can lead the world. This is a global problem. But I guess let me reiterate what I've said many times. Anyone who does not think that this is a global crisis of huge consequence is kidding himself or herself. We have got to be absolutely aggressive. And when we do that, we can create millions of decent paying jobs.
Wonderful. So we're getting ready to a kind of wrapping up point. And so I'm wondering, as we talk about the need to sustain the kind of work that we need to have this political revolution take place. I'm wondering if, in your closing remarks, if you all can speak to where you can find the strength to keep pushing, because we know it's a lot of opposition when you do this kind of work. So how do you find the strength to keep pushing strategically and sustainably, riffing on Senator Sanders' climate change remarks?
So I think one thing that, or one way that this campaign hasn't been described, and I've been thinking about a lot of this, is that this is the campaign of audacity. We have the audacity to believe that we are worthy. We have the audacity to believe that peace and diplomacy is better than war. We have the audacity to believe that everyone deserves a fair fighting chance in our country. We have the audacity. And for me, what Senator Sanders came and brought, there was already a political revolution. So Senator Sanders didn't come and introduce anything new. What Senator Sanders and the Bernie Sanders campaign was able to do is take the political revolution that was already swollen on the ground and gave us a platform to talk about our issues. There are people who've been doing criminal justice reform, sisters and brothers, for decades, if not more than that. There have been people doing work around immigration reform, money out of politics, gun violence prevention, gun control. Like, people been doing this work, right? So Senator Sanders didn't introduce this to us. He just said, this campaign is not about Bernie Sanders, this is about us. So I'm gonna give you a platform. I don't have any credentials to be, I personally feel humbled as I was telling folks that on the day of the debate, I was in the spin room on behalf of the campaign when another candidate brought all the top New York State brokers, top elected officials from the governor to members of Congress, and Senator Sanders gave the platform for the organizers in New York to come in there and talk directly to the media. So, what sustains me is that I'm not part of a political campaign, I'm part of a political revolution. I've always been part of one, and I'm gonna always be part of one till the last day that I'm on this earth. And I'm grateful to Senator Sanders for having the audacity to bring up the very issues that many of us have been working on for so many years. And what's gonna keep me going is the people that are in this campaign. Bernie didn't make me white. Did he make you white? He didn't make me white. If you got into this campaign and you saw the number of young people, but also young people of color that are at the core of this campaign, you would understand that the future of our country is in the right hands. And I will say this, and I'm going to say this to the Democratic Party. I'm a Democrat, but I'm not a loyal Democrat. If I was the Democratic Party, if I was part of the establishment, I'd look at this campaign and say, where the heck did all these young people come from? These are the future of the party, and they don't know how to engage us. They're calling the future leadership of this nation, they're calling us uninformed, idealistic, they're calling us naive. We're in it for the, I don't know what, I'm not going to even repeat what that would, you already know where I'm going with this. But my point is this. The young people that are part of this campaign are fed up. We have no loyalties to the establishment that has done nothing for us and for our communities. And I want to tell Senator Sanders that we're going to the White House, but if something, I don't know what that is, we're going. I'm on my way there. But if something happens and we don't get to the White House, I'm committed that post-November, that I'm still part of this political revolution, and I ask you to be part of this political revolution.
That's right, that's right, that's right. Now, I just want to add, as an old school brother, that like Frank Sinatra, I'm young at heart. So some of us older folk are on fire too for Brother Bernie Sanders. Well, we appreciate the young folk. We appreciate some of us older folk. And it has much to do with his soul craft, that his soul has been shaped by a mother and a father and a brother and a wife and children and grandchildren to give him a certain character. Because we live in the most commodified culture in the history of the world, which means that everybody and everything is for sale. This brother is not for sale. He's not for sale. That's very important. That's crucial. That's a quality of character. That's courage. That's crucial. And that's not just a political judgment. It's a moral and spiritual judgment that has political consequences. And that's why when the younger generation looks and sees, because they have been bombarded by market culture more intensely than I have, and they looking for something real. They looking for something real. And they got it in this brother. They got it in the brother.
Absolutely.
This Friday night is the beginning of Passover. You know the story. So 400 years, people were enslaved. 400 years, they were hopeless. They felt like nobody was speaking for them. They were riled up inside, but nobody was speaking for them. And then, not to compare you to Moses, but somebody got angry enough to say it's time to go. It's time to believe that what has been impossible for so many generations, that nobody has ever known freedom, is actually possible. Trust me. Go through this water with me. Trust me. Come, and you will not believe what is on the other side. The Hebrew is Ozi v'zimratya v'yehili lishua. God, be my strength. Ozi v'zimratya.